Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to yet another episode on the Pure Digital Passion Podcast with me, Moses Kamibaro. My guest today is Alice Munyua from Mozilla. Alice is somebody that I've known for many, many years. We go back to what we like to call the OG days of the internet in Kenya. It's such a pleasure to have her here today on the Pure Digital Passion Podcast. Alice, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm really delighted to be here. It's a great honor to be with you again, Moses, to be reunited. My name is Alice Munyua. I am Senior Director with Mozilla Corporation. Mozilla is not a huge organization. We have Mozilla, we are actually a public or a non-profit. We are owned by the Mozilla Foundation. But we also have the Mozilla Foundation owns the Mozilla Corporation, and the Mozilla Foundation also owns Mozilla Ventures, and that we've just launched. And we've also just launched Mozilla AI. So there are several bits of Mozilla that are owned by the umbrella body, which is the Mozilla Foundation.
Fantastic. I think we're gonna get into all those details of Mozilla. It looks like there's so many branches there, from what I remember. But Alice, I'd like to maybe go back to origins. Of course, I knew you from probably almost 20 years ago, perhaps.
Yes.
And that was back when I think you and I were sitting on the board with the KeNIC,
Yes.
Which is the domain name registry in the country. And I think I'd just like to get a little bit more about your background, because I know also you're Dr. Alice. Let's talk about origins. Where does Alice come from? How did she grow up? How did she end up in this career at an amazing organization with Mozilla? I'd just like to know a little bit more about your backstory for our audience.
Okay. Oh, well, thank you. I grew up partly here in Nairobi, in Kenya. But then when I was 16, I went off to Italy. I went and finished my high school in Rome. First did a year of just Italian.
Wow. Are you fluent in Italian?
Yes, I am fluent in Italian, but I haven't spoken it in so many years.
Yeah?
So sometimes I forget. But as soon as I land in Italy, it all
It
comes
comes
back.
back, yeah?
Just like my Kenglish, it all comes back.
Yeah.
And I do love my Kenglish. So went to school there and immediately went to university, the Pontifical Gregorian University, which is a Vatican university.
Wow.
So studied where Pope John Paul I and the current Pope actually went to school.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and we were, I think, the third or fourth cohort of civilians at a Vatican university. So that's where I did my master's specialization in social communications. We used to call it that then.
Okay.
Because we really didn't understand. I'm really pretty older than you. Because we used to look at it, so the Vatican, the Catholic Church was really curious about this new ways of communicating, like the so-called internet that was coming up. And so they created a course called Social Communications that was under the Social Sciences faculty.
Okay.
And so I was taught by really clever Jesuits. My favorite was Father Robert White, Society of Jesus. And then after that, worked for about 2 years as a broadcaster for the Africa service of the Vatican Radio.
No way, you actually in media at some point?
Yes.
Wow.
With the Vatican Radio.
Okay.
And in fact, it's from there that the Jesuits then sent me over to Lukole camp on the border of Tanzania in a place called Ngara. And that was 4 years after the Rwandan genocide had taken place.
Oh, wow.
And the rationale behind Radio Kwizera, meaning Radio Hope in English, was how can we use radio to counter the effects? Because radio had been used for genocide.
As a catalyst.
As a catalyst for the genocide. So how can we use it for the opposite? So I was the director for that. I was really young, in my 20s. I really believe I didn't know what I was doing because I was managing a bunch of really older Jesuits.
Yes.
Well-versed, much more educated Jesuits. But there I was with a radio that was actually managed by nearly 90% of the people that were managing that, broadcasting and producing programs were refugees.
Yes.
Yeah, both from the camps, because the two camps had to be separated, the Hutus on one end
Wow,
and the Tutsis.
even at that point, yeah?
Yeah, and there was a camp that now had both, those who had intermarried.
Wow.
So I was being hosted by the UNHCR, and I was there when they just started repatriating, because the Tanzanian government wanted to close the camp. The UNHCR also thought it was time. And so we used radio trying to convince people that Rwanda was safe to go back home. So that, I stayed there for about 2 years, 2.5
Okay.
years, because it was actually really traumatizing.
I can imagine it was
And
so fresh at that point. Huh?
exactly, needed a lot of therapy, so we
Wow.
were provided therapy often. So left and came back to Nairobi, had my daughter,
Okay.
and wanted to have her in Nairobi, Kenya.
Okay.
So it's
Okay.
during that period then I got called in to work with the African Women's Development and Communications Network, FEMNET,
Okay.
and
Okay.
got into gender and ICTs and participated in the first World Summit on the Information Society that was held in Bamako in 2002.
Okay.
And then that was it. I just got into ICTs fully, representing FEMNET, and then after that got grabbed by the Association for Progressive Communications.
Okay.
And while there, we got funding by the UK Department for International Development
Yes.
for a massive project called Catalyzing Access in ICTs in Africa. And it had various components, and I was given the policy component to manage.
Uh-huh.
And so the way I went about the vision I created and implemented was we were given money to do the work to help catalyze ICT policy in 7 countries.
Yes.
And I thought, okay, let's find champions in each of the countries. Kenya was one, Senegal, South Africa, DRC Congo, Cameroon, and others. And I thought, okay, let's have champions championing ICT policy in each country.
Yes.
Yeah, but during that period, working with the APC,
Yes.
it was the first time I ever got dismissed.
Oh, really? Actually, I knew you were at APC, right?
Yeah,
Because I
I
remember
got
sending an email to
dismissed,
abc.org. Yeah.
So,
Wow.
and while at the time that I was actually dismissed, I was sitting with the former Minister Joseph Musheru, who was then the chair of TESPOC.
Yes, I remember.
Muriuki Mureithi, Brian Longwe.
Oh, wow.
So the 4 of us.
The OGs.
Yeah, the OGs. So I remember going to them and really being emotional about having, lost a job. I was going through a difficult period in my personal life. And we sat there, and I think it was Brian and Musheru who said, you know what? Let's teach APC a lesson. We're going to make you the champion for Kenya. This same strategy you created, the model you created works perfectly. So we and had made it in a way that the participants of this workshop would elect their own national champion.
Mm-hmm.
And so Kenyans, all the Kenyans that were there from various aspects of the ICT sector, just selected me. So I lost my job on a Monday. On Wednesday, I was given
that's
by
wonderful.
my own people the position to actually be the national champion. But because it wasn't that much money, Joseph Musheru actually said, well, actually TESPOC will provide additional funding.
Wow.
And soon after that, we had quite a lot of funding from various donors. And that's when I created the Kenya ICT Action Network in 2004.
Yes.
So I founded KeNIC and decided the way we were going to go about doing policy was we were fighting each other. The private sector on one hand,
government
civil society on one hand, government telling us that the internet is illegal on the other, if you recall.
I remember.
And so I thought, why don't we create a forum that brings us all together so we stop fighting?
Yes.
And then that's around the time we had a change of government. The Kibaki government came in.
Correct.
And Honorable, His Excellency Kibaki was very open and provided a policy window that created the first Ministry of Information Communication.
I remember.
So I ended up working with Honorable Raphael Tuju and Honorable James Rege, and the two of them were really supportive of the work. And so calling them up, and I said, help me, so that we stop fighting each other. Let's come together. And in fact, I'll never forget, we got a call from Honorable Mudaura saying, why are you fighting us out there? Let's get together.
Nice.
Yeah. But one thing I did was to make sure that we are recording and documenting every single process of KeNIC. So Muroki Murithi was the biggest, well-known researcher, very distinguished researcher of the telecommunications sector. And so from the very first day, he started recording the processes, how we got elected, my first steering committee or advisors was, of course, Mushero, Brand Longwe, and
those
Muruki
people, yeah.
Mureithi. So that's how we got, and then our financial manager, because I didn't want to be burdened with managing so many donors, because we had quite a number of donors. So we gave it to Peter Githongo, John Githongo's brother, to manage KeNIC's finances. So that also avoided, kind of made sure we held our integrity so that we were not accused of,
And I think the governance structures were there very early on then,
we created those governance structures immediately. We created the governance structure and the monitoring and evaluation structure from day one. So we ensured that we were working and learning and changing course. And, as we learned about what we were doing. And so we were the group that actually brought everyone together, including Michael Joseph started contributing to that platform. People like Robert Alai and others, Alex Gakuru, we all came together.
Fantastic.
I remember we took everyone to Mombasa and sat everyone down. But before we did that, we hired a bunch of legal people, led by Warigia Bowman, Dr. Warigia Bowman, and then Mureithi. So what we did was a deep analysis of the current situation in Kenya.
Yes.
And then the legal people, came up and gave us a language. Because other countries already had a national ICT policy. So they provided a language for all of us to sit and negotiate. Fantastic. So it was like a UN process in Mombasa. So we even had the media council. We didn't leave any of the stakeholders behind. So we all went to Mombasa and we came up with the first Kenya ICT policy, 2006.
Wow.
Yeah. Then I got back, and then I think in 2005, I don't know what was going on between Honorable Tuju and Reggae with the CCK. If you recall, he disbanded the board. And so I thought, no, we're going to sue you, because you shouldn't be doing that without consulting with the stakeholders. And I'll never forget, nobody wanted to join me in this lawsuit.
Wow.
In fact, I remember DFID getting a call from DFID and saying you cannot use Katia on the lawsuit because we don't want to be seen as, British government suing the Kenyan government. So I did it alone with funding from the Soros Foundation.
Wow.
Yeah, but even before we went to court, Honorable James Reggae one day calls me and goes, have you heard the radio? Or have you heard the news? And I'm asking what news? He goes, well, we've just appointed you as a board member of the CCK.
The plot thickens, huh?
Yes, the plot thickens. And I was like, oh, I see what you're trying to do. So I rushed to Joe, Mushero, and Muriuki, and Brian, and I'm asking, what do I do? Should we accept this? Because this is us. It's all of us. It's not just me. And I remember them telling me, together with Victor Chalo, saying, please go in there because just take it.
We need you in there.
We need you in there instead of out here.
Yes.
So I joined the CCK in 2005 and served for 6 years, 2 terms. So served through the Honorable Tuju and Honorable Reggae, then Honorable Mutai Kagwe and Bitangen Demo, and then Honorable Pogisho. And then when Honorable Pogisho came in is when I decided to step away from the Kenyan scene for a while.
Yes.
Yes.
Is this the point where you left the country?
No, not really. What I did first was I was representing Kenya as a board member. I was representing Kenya on the Internet Corporation for Sign Names and Numbers. And the African Union was having a really difficult time trying to get our top-level domain, .Africa. And so by then, I was the vice chair of the Governmental Advisory Committee. And so the African Union came to me and said, Alice, you're not just the vice chair for global, you're supposed to be representing African interests. And we need you to now work on the .Africa issue. And so, my activism came back. And there I was with Muqtayyed Ali and others, and ZACR and AFTLD, actually. We all banded together. That's what I'm good at, convening everybody. Because there were several applications. And I said, let's get together because what we're doing is we're fighting just one single American. So we can't as Africans been fighting against each other because then we become weak. So I brought them all together, and then we created one application for .Africa. So, and then went to war with Sophia Bekele.
I remember.
Yes.
It was very contentious.
Yes, but then again, at the personal level, it came at a huge cost because I became the punching bag for Dot Africa.
Oh.
I would wake up in the morning.
Because you were the
and
spokesperson, you
I
were
was
the
the
face.
spokesperson, I was the face. If you recall, even being at KeNIC, the issue came up.
Yes.
Is there, so even getting KeNIC to join the Dot Africa, the fight for Dot Africa was an issue because is there conflict of interest? And that's the reason why I did not attend many of the KeNIC meetings. So there was also that need to balance.
Yes,
Yeah,
I know.
but I got, there was another, huge issue for me at a personal level. As I said, it came at a personal cost. I was sitting at a meeting, ICANN meeting in Beijing, and one of my Kenyan colleagues from the Kenyan government literally writes an email while we're all sitting to the entire GAC and says Alice Munyua should not be talking on behalf of Kenya about South Africa.
What?
I had not been warned by anybody.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. So I remember sitting there and my South African colleague from the South African government is saying, Alice, look at the email. And she's sitting across. So I look at the email and I'm like, what is going on? So I step up. So I'm raising my hand and the chair of the GAC is refusing to even look at me.
Because of this email?
Because this email that I haven't read. So I walk out and I call Dr. Bitang Ndemo and I ask, what the hell is going on? And he says, well, there's another letter that Honorable Pogisho has signed supporting Sophia Bekele.
Wow.
Yes. So Kenya had two letters
At the
written
same
to
time.
ICANN. One that came from the ministry, and that was the one that had preceded it because our own Honorable Kibaki had signed on to the convention that had given the AU the mandate to fight for South Africa. So, of course, that was, when you think about foreign policy, that should have been the authentic. So there was this confusion, and ICANN was saying, Kenya, can you make up your mind? Why are you supporting two applications? One, an individual American woman, and one, the African Union.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I remember, tail between my legs, leaving the room and leaving that meeting, coming back. Felt like, when a chicken is rained on and has been plucked. That's how I felt. Came back, collected myself, continued to fight. But that's when I left the government completely. I was like, I cannot continue with this kind of politics and backstabbing. So I said, I resigned. I said, I'm not interested. And then what happened then is ZACR, that was the one that was given the responsibility by the African Union, supported by the South African government, decided to hire me as a consultant to continue supporting governments in the Dot Africa process. So I continued until the Dot Africa top-level domain was delegated to Africa.
Correct.
To the African Union.
And such a milestone, huh?
Yes, it was huge. But once that was done, because it had cost so much for me, and the cost is not about money, the cost is personal, emotional, psychological.
Relationships.
I'd had enough.
Yeah.
So, and they were all fighting who is going to be the new CEO and who's going to be the chair and who should be on the steering committee. I was like, I'm done. Bye-bye. So around that time, I got appointed to the Internet Society Board of Trustees. And ICANN then hired me as a consultant to help them create a capacity building program for governments in Africa.
Wow.
So I was hired a consultant, worked there for about 2 years. Again, office politics that I was not used to. I was like, arrivederci to that too. So I decided, why don't I do my PhD? So while having my last meeting as the board of trustees of ISOC, I decided I wasn't going to go back into ISOC because I had an issue with them. They had their diversity inclusivity program. They did not have any diversity inclusivity, and they still have problems with that till today. The board, so, and the way they go about just inclusivity. I had an
Yeah,
issue
it was
with
very
it.
old school.
Yeah, so I said I don't want to be part of that.
Okay.
The lack of respect for the African continent, or not just the Africa, the lack of respect for people from the global majority was rather disturbing. So I remember sitting there and saying, "Oh yeah, I have two friends in Mozilla, the Mozilla Foundation. Let me become a fellow and do my PhD." But around that time, I remember calling Chris Riley and Yokai Benavi, who are running the Mozilla Policy org, and telling them, hey, can I get a fellowship? And they said, well, we are the corporation, so you'd have to get the fellowship from the foundation. So we're the wrong people.
Okay.
But Alice, please, this is so serendipitous. We're looking for somebody to do policy for us in the Africa region.
And what year is this?
This was in 2018.
Okay, not too long ago.
Not too long ago.
Yeah.
So, and I remember saying, no, I'm so tired of the ICT policy scene. I've been too bruised. I just want to sit back and go back to academia. And they said, please, please, please. I said, okay, I'll give you 2 years.
Okay.
So I went in, and Mozilla is a really great place to work for. So they gave me freedom. They said, choose an issue, any policy issue you'd like to work on. And so I decided to focus on what Mozilla is good at: privacy and data protection.
Fantastic.
And around that time, the World Bank was forcing a lot of our African government to implement digital ID. So I got into it, and I said, why are you, and strangely enough, just about when I got into it, in December 2018, the Uhuru administration released that 360 Miscellaneous Act, and hidden under page 320 or something was a whole thing giving the government the right to collect such sensitive data from Kenyans. Our DNA, our iris scans, our earlobe geometry, our GPS was all in there, giving the government that authority. So you were like, no, you cannot have that without guardrails. And then even the way they were going about it was they were going to collect all this data of over 40 million Kenyans and put it in one database, creating a honeypot for,
anyone who wants
to steal the data. Like Aadhaar in India, you can buy the data for only 2,000 shillings, right now.
Wow.
So we had to go again and do strategic litigation. And so we supported Lawyers Hub, Kenya Human Rights Commission, Namati, and others with more legal advice and some funding to actually, agitate that you cannot implement Huduma number without a data protection bill.
And that is so important because most citizens may not even have the time to look at the document even when it's floated out.
Exactly.
And therefore are not aware of the issues that are being assented, right?
Exactly. And so, and by the way, that was done without, unconstitutionally, because there was no public debate.
There's no stakeholder engagement or anything?
There was no public engagement at all on Huduma number. And in fact, we wouldn't have known about it if somebody hadn't written and said, oh my God, Alice, have you seen? And send me the bill. And so I remember putting out a blog that is still there saying the Kenyan government is doing this. And we put it out on a Friday, on a day where we thought no one is going to pick up this story. By Monday, our phones were buzzing. It had gone viral, that blog. And so so we started engaging with the government, because Mozilla doesn't believe in fighting the government. Instead, it's about, let's work together and help you create the right environment for what you're trying to do. What you're trying to do is not wrong.
It has good intentions.
It has good intention, but you don't know how dangerous it is, to begin with. And so we also not just were asking the Kenyan government questions, but we are also asking World Bank, why are you only doing this in Africa? Why are you not doing this in the United States, in England, in the other, and then finding out that it's the reasoning behind it is because the service providers of that digital ID systems were mostly Europeans and Americans wanting to do business, wanting to, get data. So we had entered the era of the so-called surveillance economy. And so I think we were the only country that really fought it. And I think you had 2 or 3 days ago, it was considered unconstitutional and illegal, huduma number. But we ended up with a data protection commissioner.
Yes.
And she's doing a really great job. And I think our Data Protection Act, I think it's one of the best in the continent.
Yeah, I know it's largely modeled around the GDPR,
Yes.
but also at the same time, I think even people are now looking at Kenya as a model for the rest of
Yes,
Africa.
exactly.
And personally, I can say that this is something that I bring up a lot in my conversations today in the digital marketing sphere, which is what I do. And I keep telling people, are you making sure you're on the right side of the Data Protection Act?
Yes.
Do you know the fines for, there's an instance, I think one of the telcos, not a telco, one of the mobile companies in the device space used somebody's picture on Instagram without their consent and had to pay the equivalent, I think, of $50,000. So we're starting to see this sort of awareness or realization that data privacy is such a core component of your digital footprint today,
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's what Mozilla stands for, in that, for us, data protection and privacy by default. All our products by default. Our own Firefox mobile browser plus our desktop browser, all our products, privacy and data protection is extremely important. And in fact, one of the things we are doing, we even have a framework called Lean Data Practices.
Lean data, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
that teaches startups and businesses on how to collect data. The principles are: do not collect data that you don't need. And when you collect that data, make sure it's encrypted or protected. Make sure you're also, are talking to the customers so that they're aware. You just don't collect data that you don't need. And so you can see how Mozilla is so serious about, things like that. We are not interested in being big tech. We are more interested in being impactful. And even the way we are approaching our engagement in the African continent is more from a perspective of, we are not the experts in African issues. We don't have a solution looking for a problem. We want to partner with you. Please tell us how you'd like
Identify.
Mozilla to help you. And so the approach that I created, in fact, if anything, I'm the one that created the African strategy for Mozilla.
Correct.
And I call it the Africa Mradi. Mradi means, in Kiswahili, it means program, so the Africa program. It was my strategy. And the boards of the foundation and the corporation just said, okay, Alice, here's some funding. Tell us what to do in the Africa region. And the way I went about it is first by identifying stakeholders and asking them, what should Mozilla do? Of what you know about Mozilla, what do you think Mozilla should be doing in this space? We are not big tech. That is clear.
And your intents
so
are
we are not
different.
going to be opening offices like all the other big tech, or you have a Kenya office, an African team, this. No. We are only about 1,000 people, and we do not intend to be big tech.
Okay.
What we intend to do is to make sure that we are creating products with, not for you, with you, that put you back in control of your online life. Because as we see more and more, a lot of our online lives are being stolen and taken away by big tech. Where, for example, for you to access a service, you have to give up your data.
Correct.
Your
First
your
name,
age,
last name,
email address, mobile number. I'm not going to name them, but they're there. And Mozilla, we've been known to actually take some of them, to court for that. In fact, we've even created something we call Facebook container. So if you use Facebook, use our browser to use Facebook, our Facebook container product is going to make sure that Facebook is not mining your data. We also just recently bought another app called FakeSpot that actually protects you from websites that may be selling or providing fake fake items or fake consumer products, so that you're able to spot them. The other thing we've noticed is that the social media, what social media has become, Twitter, Facebook, the hate speech, the misogyny, the racism, has gone higher and higher. And so we're actually considering Mozilla Social. It's still in the works, where we provide a safe space. It's the same thing with Pocket, actually. The idea behind Pocket, yes, it's read it later, so it's a great product, especially for this continent where not the whole, everywhere is covered by Wi-Fi. So you're able to download audiovisual material when you have Wi-Fi and be able to still access it when you don't have it. The most important thing is that it's not algorithms that are choosing what
Or
information
defining what you
what you
consume.
should read, what you should consume. So we are combining the two. There are real humans behind it, ensuring
Oh.
that you have real news, evergreen news that is not fake, that is not abusive, so that what we're putting out there is authentic. So that's Mozilla's aspiration. And the aspiration behind it is we really truly believe that the internet is a global resource that should be open, accessible to all, but it should be healthy, it should be trustworthy, and it should be joyful. So
Yeah.
those are our mission statements, and that's what we truly believe in.
Yeah. What is the broad agenda for Africa Mradi? Like broadly speaking, what are you trying to accomplish in Africa?
Right now, we're trying to work in spaces that have not been untouched. For example, I'll pick innovation
Yes.
as one of these work streams. One of the things I think was it 2 or 3 years ago, there was a Guardian article that put out a research that was conducted in Kenya that showed that more than 90% of Kenyan startups are not Kenyan owned. And so we went ahead and, in partnership with Lawyers Hub, had a series of webinars where we brought all of us together to really talk about it. The series was called Black Founders, White Capital. And the idea was, how do we address this conundrum?
It's a real thing.
It's a real thing because, most startups always have to have either a white face so you can get money, or a white CEO, but then the founders themselves are our people. The ideas are ours, but you're not going to get money if you do not have a white person. That in itself is an issue. And so what we are trying to do is to go and actually really innovate for real issues with the real people. So we have a project called Mozilla Mashinani. So that's the reason why the first part of the innovation week or challenge was in Eldoret. But before we did that, I told you how I love to make sure that I have monitoring and evaluation as a function and research. We hired the legendary Muriuki Mureithi and Fola Odufa from Nigeria, and together in partnership with the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, conducted a very in-depth situation analysis of the startup ecosystem in the Africa region. And what that study showed was that there's a lot of concentration of money going to startups in urban areas, but no one is focusing in rural areas. And so the recommendations from these two very distinguished researchers was the way Mozilla would be impactful, especially the Africa Mradi, would be to go to Mashinani. So an Eldoret one is one of the most marginalized, and then there's a list of them. So we're going to be doing that. And I'll tell you, when my team said, we're starting with Eldoret, I'll be like, you'll be lucky if you get 10. Moses, we had over 200 people. We had to close the doors.
These are applicants looking for support.
Applicants in Eldoret. And we'd only put out the notice for 2 days.
So there is opportunity on the ground.
There were beautiful proposals. 52 of them pitched. So what we did first was we held training with one of our partners called Kitawa Wema, training for them so that they could be up to speed with the language, because people in the rural areas cannot pitch.
So how to articulate themselves.
Yeah, so how to articulate themselves, how to present their ideas in 15 minutes, how to make sure they're coming across. So we held training for them to bring them up to speed with their Nairobi counterparts. And then they pitched. Oh, it was beautiful, really beautiful. And we had gone there with the idea that we'd only, perhaps have 4. We decided we were going to carry all 52 of them that pitched. Those who didn't win, okay, of course, 7 of them won prizes because they were the best. But we decided all of them were going to join the Mozilla community, and we'll continue building their capacity in the space. So what we'll do is, several of them had agri-tech technology solutions.
Which would be endemic to Eldoret,
exactly,
yeah.
to Eldoret, of course. Dairy farming, agri-tech, all of that. So we'll put some of them together, continue incubating them, in partnership with Strathmore and with the Gladys Post Foundation and with our people in the US, in San Francisco, through the African Development Diaspora Network, so that we continue supporting them to the point where some of those businesses become viable enough to contribute to the economic and social uplifting of not just the individuals, but the community.
That they come
That will
from.
also curb the whole rural-urban migration, in a way contribute to alleviating poverty. So that's where the Africa Mradi is going about things in a very different sort of way.
So in a way, you're not going to the usual suspects.
We are not.
You're going to the marginalized, those who are not getting
Exactly.
attention. And I say this also as a way because even when my career started, I was based in Mombasa.
You see?
With Africa Online and Formnet, if you recall. And you always felt that unless you're in Nairobi, your opportunities were limited.
Exactly.
That's the reason I moved here.
Yeah.
So there you go.
There you go. And so we'll go to other counties. We'll work at the county level. So we'll go to Homa Bay, we'll go to
Wow.
Kilifi, we'll go to, so we'll go to many counties. And in fact, we've now been approached by the government of Zambia, the minister of Zambia.
Okay.
His Excellency and the minister of Zambia, in fact, he sent his representative to the Innovation Week to study and learn. So we've been invited to do what we are doing in Kenya, in Zambia. But the reason why I chose Kenya because I could have decided to start in South Africa, the usual, or in Nigeria. It's because I'm Kenyan.
Of course.
But it's not just because I'm from a patriotic. It's because I really truly believe Kenya is one of the best African countries in terms of we have the most educated people, even though they don't have jobs. And this is the best place to really do something different and to be impactful. Because I understand our culture, I understand us, and I also wanted to give back to my country.
Yeah.
Yes.
So maybe you can expound a little bit more about the Innovation Week, which obviously happened last week.
Yes.
And I think for me, what really impressed me when I saw it all happening, unfortunately, we couldn't meet last week because I was so busy.
Yeah.
I saw that even, the CEO of Mozilla also came. So the entire organization, the leadership team was here. Maybe tell us a little bit more about the Innovation Week and what was the intent, what was the outcome? And of course, I believe you also had your strategic retreat in Kenya as well at the same time.
Yes.
Yes.
So the Innovation Week was an idea that, my colleague Imo and I came up with and thought, why don't we do an Innovation Week? Because it's part of our KPI as Mozilla. We decided one of our KPIs is we should have 5 new products in the next 10 years that we can invest in.
Okay.
And I thought to myself, I want those 5 new products to be coming from the Africa region. So really all those 10 new products. I said I want 5 of those products to come from the Africa region to prove that the Africa region is not that poor, dark continent that is stereotyped out there. I'm proud of who we are. And once you live in the US, you really, really have to it really gets to you how our continent is stereotyped. And I wanted to show that, no, we have, everybody out there has the wrong impression of this continent.
Yes.
And anyway, look at Kenya, with our M-Pesa, Ushahidi, all of Semabox and the others.
Yes.
So I really wanted to prove that we are worth it. We are worth investing in, and in fact, we have really great ideas and ideas that are impactful. But also, a lot of our tech ideas tend to be filling the gap where there are public service gaps. So they're real issues. And because Mozilla really truly believes in innovating for real life, so it felt really, poignant in terms of, how we go about it. And so what we did in April, we launched a challenge.
Okay.
And the first county was, Eldoret. Ended up with over 200 people coming in, 52 of them pitching. And then we launched the challenge now Africa-wide. But because, Kenya was the focus, 580 people applied.
Wow.
Took our challenge. So we had a panel of reviewers drawn from our partners, GSMA and Afralty and Strathmore,
Yes.
iHub, and others. So we were not even involved. They're the ones that, shortlisted the 20. And then the 20 then came, and I also wanted to do something different. So instead of holding it in a hotel, the Arboretum. So where
Yeah, I
else?
thought that was a bit unusual.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know we were the first fast tech company to hold such a huge function in the Arboretum. But the Arboretum provided space for all those 20 startup ideas to
Yes.
showcase. So each one of them had a booth. So instead of commercial partners, the usual, we wanted to do something different. So instead, it was those who had won, who had been shortlisted, were the ones showcasing their products. So the walkthrough. And also, I had such great support. I must really commend my executives, Mozilla executives, including a board member, for the courage and bravery to actually say, we're coming. We're going to get out of our own, echo chamber that is Silicon Valley, but also the courage and bravery to get out of the echo chambers, the so-called Silicon Valley, the so-called Silicon Valley echo chamber in the US and the so-called Silicon Savannah
Of Nairobi.
of Nairobi. To venture out there and
Yeah.
get people from the rural area. In fact, some of our swag wasn't the usual T-shirts. It was gourds made by women from Eldoret.
Wow.
The gourds from Masai and Eldoret, the gourds that they used to carry milk.
Yes.
And beads. So we actually engaged women groups in Masai land and in Eldoret to do our swag. So it wasn't your typical
wow.
hoodies and T-shirts. So it was really different.
Traditional, yes.
And we focused on just every single 20 of them pitched. And we did not have the usual panel of judges, like three wise men or three wise women judging. So everybody that was part of that, all 700 people voted.
So it's completely democratic.
Very democratic. There was a voting system. Everyone voted on different categories. And of course, we then ended up with the 6 winners. But we are carrying all the 20, just like we did with Eldoret, because my idea is also to create a Mozilla community. So continue to build their capacity, to continue to build the youth as a way of contributing to really alleviating poverty, but also to the current government's really focus on youth, so that we can empower youth in rural areas to contribute to the digital economy at the rural level. So that is how it came about. It was 2 days, and to have our executives here, we had our our CEO and
I
founder,
saw that, yeah.
and chairwoman, our chief marketing officer. We had our chief product officer as well. And we also, I'm so pleased and proud about it, legendary Eliud Kipchoge agreed to become Mozilla's ambassador.
Fantastic.
Mozilla's Africa Mradi ambassador.
Fantastic.
Yeah, because he believes in what we do. So it was a really natural sort of partnership. Yeah.
So from your perspective, going forward, what can we expect from Mozilla Africa Mradi the way forward, the next 2 to 5 years? What are the things that are on your mind, given that you have this recency around the event you held, this time you spent in Kenya with the organization and your team, who I believe you took to the Masai Mara again?
Yes.
I feel like you're really selling Kenya as the best place in Africa, right?
It's my country. Come on, I have to start
I think
home.
it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. And I think
Yes.
you're actually kind of acting as almost as an ambassador, showing
Yes.
them all the bits and bobs that make Kenya so wonderful.
Yes.
And I think that's so wonderful. But also, I feel like, as I'm hearing more and more what you're talking about, it almost feels like Mozilla leads from behind.
Yes.
Meaning that you let the stakeholder drive you or point the direction. You bring in the pieces. You don't have a purely commercial agenda.
Not at all.
And you're kind of looking at the bigger picture of inclusivity, support, privacy, all these drivers. But therefore, next 2 to 5 years, I mean, you mentioned something to me earlier about AI. I'm just really curious to see, where is it going? What are the products? What's coming next?
Yeah, what's coming next? I think, in fact, the reason why we created Mozilla AI is because we started getting really concerned about where AI is going. And our Mozilla AI, organization is actually looking at exactly that, looking at AI from a trustworthy, ethical perspective. And so we are also going to try and support a lot of these startups to integrate AI in a way that is trustworthy and ethical. that is not biased, that really, creates a healthy internet. So it's still back to even the Africa Mradi itself's long-term vision is creating an African internet that is trustworthy, that is respectful, that is joyful, that is healthy. And so for the next couple of days, of course, the team needs to rest. We're exhausted.
Yeah,
It's tough putting together such a huge thing, even though it wasn't huge, but it was quite a lot of
you're allowed
work.
to travel here. You did your things here.
Exactly.
It's quite a big change.
So it's a bit of rest first, and then we sit down and take lessons learned. Like, for example, one of the lessons that I'm going to be very honest about is while we had panels, in retrospect, the next time, we're going to make sure that they become more of a, so if it's a panel about agri-tech, you're not just speaking to each other about what agri-tech is. The idea should be you're talking to agri-tech startups and telling them this is what you should do for your agri-tech startup for it to succeed. If it's a policy panel, like I really loved the way the Secretary General of the African Telecommunications Union, the policy panel was brilliant. It had Andrew Shell, the head of the ITU, Africa Bureau, Mr. John Omo, Secretary General. It had Ambassador David Gross. It had Dr. Towela Nyirenda, Dr. Chitundu from Zambia, and Linda Bonyo from Lawyers Hub. And what they did was actually advise the startups on what are the policy issues they should be looking out for as they roll out their startups. So what we're going to be doing is sitting back, what did we learn? But most importantly, it'll be supporting the current cohort, the first cohort of startups.
Okay.
The 52 from Eldoret and the 20 from Kenya. So building their capacity, incubating them, having our Mozilla engineers providing capacity building, to see how they can integrate some of our products, for example, Common Voice and Pocket, into their own startup so that it adds, it creates even more value.
Yes.
So that's going to be the next, 1 to 2 years. And then we have this invitation from the government of Zambia to support them in the same way we've done in Kenya. But we're also going to be working with the Kenyan government, with the Ministry of Information Communication around, Gava kwa mkono, mkononi, with others in capacity building to bring back the principles of open source. Because open source means freedom. What does open source mean? It's freedom.
Doesn't have hidden agenda.
Inclusivity. It may not be free because you need resources to implement it. But if you use open source products, you're not boxed in by proprietary software where the government spends billions and billions and billions of shillings. And instead, what you do, that's going to be my next thing, is encouraging our government to actually take on open source because, one, it gives us its freedom for my country. Two, it's providing our youth with work and coding and innovating, because open source means open API, so they can innovate and perhaps innovate around, like for e-citizen portal, Gava Mkononi, contribute to that. And it's providing jobs for our own youth, providing freedom for our government institutions, providing inclusivity, all the principles that is open source.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Alice, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Really
too.
appreciate
I'm really
it.
honored.
Yeah,
and so good to see you again.
And great to reconnect again after
yes,
many years.
I'm really pleased. Yes.
And once again, thank you for joining us on the Pure Digital Passion podcast. That's been Alice Munyua from the Mozilla organization. And once again, we'll catch you in the next one. Thank you.